Dear Bones, I write to inform you of one more discovery. Whilst exploring the Chapelwaite Library, I did stumble upon another noteworthy addition, a short story collection by one Stephen King, an odd little collection of macabre tales. But one of these short stories did pique my interest. A story titled Jerusalem's Lot. It may be coincidence, but that is the name of the town on that peculiar map I found. I must read further, and will let you know of any developments. Your affectionate friend, Charles. Dear Bones, a most frightful experience. I have finished reading the aforementioned story, and can only surmise that I have truly gone mad, or that my fevers have returned. The story seems to concern the very house I currently reside in, and even more horrific, I seem to be the character at the centre of the story. It tells of how I came to inherit this house, and the rats in the walls. How it was my ancestors that came to Jerusalem's Lot and started a cult. They were the ones who read from that ghastly book, The Mystery of the Worm, and they summoned that creature. How Calvin and I would go to explore it, and Calvin, my God, poor Calvin. Shh. Did you hear that? It's the rats again. You can always hear them scurrying. Shh. Listen. Your affectionate friend, Charles. Taking a detour from reading all of Stephen King's published full-length novels, I'm also going to be creating a shorter videos as part of my Short King series. I will still be attempting to read these in mostly published orders, but in order of the published collections. This story is just by chance the first story in the collection published as Night Shift. But I wanted to talk about this story first, more as because it serves as a direct prequel to Salem's Lot, which I've just finished and just did a video on. The short story, Jerusalem's Lot, first published in Night Shift in 1978, is set in the 1850s, which is over 100 years before the events of Salem's Lot. It's told in a letter form, so the whole story is comprised of letters written by one Charles Boone, and also you get some diary entries and from Charles's manservant Calvin McCann. So after being left an ancestral home called Chapelwaite by his estranged cousin in order to kind of heal an age-long family rift, Charles Boone arrives at Preacher's Corner in Maine. In a series of letters to a man named Bones, Charles tells of how they're setting about trying to make a life for themselves after Charles has spent some time recovering from an illness in Florida. The house is run down and Charles keeps hearing rats in the walls, and due to the history of kind of sad and tragic events, many of the locals in the town of Preacher's Corner consider Chapelwaite to be a house that has turned bad. Again, very similar to Salem's Lot's Marston House. So this draws to me very obvious parallels to the Marston House, another house that seemed to have absorbed the evil actions of those that had resided there. Anyway, whilst kind of looking through the library of the Chapelwaite house, Calvin, the manservant, finds a hidden compartment. Has a map inside the compartment which shows a town called Jerusalem's Lot, with the writing just above Jerusalem's Lot, "The worm doth corrupt" on it. So deciding to go out and explore this town, Charles and Calvin find it completely deserted and abandoned, but untouched. So no windows broken, just an untouched, deserted ghost town. They also find a church, which inside has an inverted cross and some indescribable obscenity. At the pulpit of the church, they find a book called De Vermis Mysterious, translated to The Mystery of the Worm. Charles touches the book and seems to awaken something by doing so. The ground trembles beneath him and they kind of just leave the town immediately, kind of shook up by what happened. Charles finds himself, after this, feared and reviled by the locals of Preacher's Corner. Apparently there have been bad omens that have appeared since his arrival in the house. He also finds out that the family rift in his family tree occurred when his grandfather tried to steal the book, The Mystery of the Worm, on the pulpit from his own brother Philip. It turns out that Jerusalem's Lot was a kind of inbred sort of town founded by one of Charles's distant relatives called James Boone, and the residents practiced some kind of occult witchcraft, and together Philip and James had used the book, the Vermis Mysterious, to call forward a great evil called the Worm, and shortly after this the whole town just disappeared. So whilst this is unravelling, Charles and Calvin also decide to check out the basement of their own chapel where look for the rats, and instead they find the undead forms of two of Charles's relatives. You can kind of easily surmise that they are vampires, although I think they use the word Nosferatu. It's not actually outright stated that they are vampires, but it's easy to kind of surmise that. So anyway, after this encounter, Charles and Calvin return to Jerusalem's Lot, where they find a lamb sacrificed on the altar. Charles touches the book again and becomes kind of possessed, and starts to summon the worm. He's doing an incantation. He's stopped by Calvin, but the worm does appear, and as Calvin then sets fire to the book, Calvin is then hit and killed by the worm, and the worm disappears and leaves behind Charles, and then like an undead James Boone appears from this kind of pit. Charles flees, and feeling that the curse is kind of just related to his family, and it was like the blood calling to blood that had led him to Jerusalem's Lot. Charles declares that he's going to kill himself. Believing that he's the only surviving member of his bloodline. Then we can get a postscript at the end of the book that kind of tells us that there was another relative, and the bloodline is still alive and well in 1975. This short story is an odd one for me, as although it does deal with the town itself of Salem's Lot, it is a prequel that to me deals with the themes of Salem's Lot more than the events. So it has a rather fleeting link to vampires that dominate the full-length novel, but does really do a great job in reinforcing this idea that evil is an infection, or of evil calling out. It also brings forth this kind of cyclical nature of the town, with Jerusalem's Lot being turned into a ghost town at least once before, so it kind of goes through the cycles of evil and being deserted. The short story also feels more like a love letter as well to the works of like H.P. Lovecraft. In fact, more than a vampire story, this story could kind of seen like a direct entry into like the mythos lore. So the inclusion of the Vermis Mysterious seems to confirm this. So that book was a fictional book first created by Robert Locke, who was a protege of Lovecraft, and then later directly included that book in Lovecraft's own work. So this would mean that the worm of the story would be one of the Cthulhu monsters, sharing like kind of the same universe as those tales rather than Stephen King's normal universe. It's interesting to note that this book also turns up again, so the Vermis Mysterious, in Revival later on. I also thought it was interesting how when the worm is defeated, Charles Boone writes, it still lives. The burning of the book thwarted it, and with the word "it" written in italics. I don't want to be too basic, but like part of me wonders, is the cosmic evil in the novel "It" also related kind of to this Cthulhu monster, or some believe this one to be called Gaigan, or is it still from the same cosmic realm as this monster? Anyway, enough of that. I kind of really enjoyed this short story. I enjoyed getting to know the history of Salem, so I thought it was good at that. And I think as like an exercise in homage to cosmic horror, it's an incredibly atmospheric piece of writing. The choice to deliver the narrative as letters really works well to make this piece feel of kind of the time it was set. And King does really a wonderful job of delivering Charles's voice in particular. I do think it falls down when it comes to like kind of character relationship. There's not really much development there, but again, it's only a short story, and what King really does well here is gets across the themes in a really concise and economical way. It also makes me want to go and explore now like the whole Cthulhu mythos. So, however, it might be a bit too big of an excursion on my current reading plans, but one day I'll get to it. Anyway, overall, I think this story is a kind of a solid, for a short story, 4 out of 5. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. If you did enjoy the short story, please let me know what you thought of it in the comments. And if you like this video, please do like and subscribe to the channel. And may you have long days and pleasant nights.